You're in for such a great treat today. We have some of the brightest minds in the business here to share with you about the next generation of audiences, and I'd like to introduce the panel. We have Nan Keaton, Director of External Affairs for the San Francisco Symphony, Alan Brown, Principal of Wolf Brown, and the session will be moderated by Gail Eichenthal, Executive Producer of KUSC and KDFC. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kelly. It's really a true privilege to be here today with the Association of California Symphony Orchestras and to be moderating a presentation by two people who I believe have done more to try and solve the myriad challenges that you all face of running a nonprofit in the 21st century than anyone I know, and truly two of the brightest minds in the field. At KUSC and KDFC, which is our fairly recent adopted child in Northern California, we together reach more than 1 million listeners a week, and it is certainly part of our mission statement to not only help expand our own audience and stay alive as a radio station, but to make classical music and the arts a more important part of people's lives, and to therefore expand the audience for live concerts, to do what we can on the radio to do that. There is room for expansion. At a senior management retreat that I attended just yesterday, we looked at the challenges of taking classical music radio into the next 10, 20 years. And we were all feeling a little queasy. Some of those sensations that Jeremy Hunter described, nausea, sweat, it was all there. But some of the data is really interesting on this. Very, very briefly, because I want to turn it over to Alan and Nan. We learned that according to the Americans for the Arts local index, something fairly new, in San Francisco County, just 41% of adults are involved in going to live events in one of the most culturally enlightened, if not the most culturally enlightened region of the country, 41%. Which sounds a little depressing until you hear the Los Angeles County number, 17.8%. So there's room for expansion. There's room to get more butts in those chairs, and that's what we're going to talk about this afternoon. At KUSC, through our Saturday morning arts program called Arts Alive, we do try and spread the word about what you're doing. We have informal arts calendars. We broadcast many wonderful partner organizations who are here today, the LA Chamber Orchestra, the LA Philharmonic, Pacific Symphony, Pacific Chorale, where Kelly used to have a stomping ground, LA Master Chorale. At KDFC, we have recently hired a full-time arts reporter. That's the opposite direction most newspapers are going these days. Jeffrey Fryman-Wire, who does 2-minute State of the Arts reports. We broadcast the San Francisco Symphony, the Philharmonia Baroque, New Century Chamber Orchestra, and San Francisco Opera, among many other groups as well. So, and we have some new ideas that we'll be sharing with you shortly. The model is changing for all of us. It's a new world of technology almost on a weekly basis. I think it was within the last 48 hours that Pandora Classical launched, a new challenge for KUSC. New music delivery systems. So we confront a lot of the same challenges that you do. The sheer explosion of available cultural offerings, the challenge of standing out in such a crowd, the shrinking cultural coverage in the mainstream media. So 2 years ago, we launched at KUSC an interactive department to try to develop opportunities to extend our mission with mobile apps and other services. Very creatively, the San Francisco Symphony, as it was approaching its 100th anniversary, decided to take a really good look at what the organization was going to be looking like for the next 50 years, not only in terms of artistic strategy, but also the very physical plant where they present concerts. Davies Symphony Hall was 35 years old, and they really were being extremely self-reflective, looking at changes in demographics and also trends in arts participation. So the Symphony commissioned an in-depth study, a remarkable study, by the best researcher in the field, Alan Brown. And Nan Keaton will tell us what happened.
Thank you, Gail. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here today, and we're going to share some of that research that Alan and his partners did with the San Francisco Symphony in early 2012 when we set about to attempt to answer the question, what does our home need to look like in 2050? It's really not that far away, and we feel like we've kind of, had a lot of growing that's happened since we opened in 1980. We didn't have a youth orchestra at that time. Our education program, Adventures in Music, wasn't happening at all. We now do 220 public concerts a year, both in San Francisco and throughout other cities as well. And so we really wanted to take a good look, and I hats off to our board who led an effort to understand how are things changing and how can research help us understand that. So Alan and I are going to share what we learned in San Francisco, but I want to say that these methods, these ideas are accessible to many of you. It's not normal for any nonprofit of any size to have big research budgets. It wasn't normal for the San Francisco Symphony to have a large budget for research. We had the opportunity with this project with Alan to take a deep dive in a way that was significant for us. And it all really does start with a look at who lives in our community. San Francisco Symphony pulls from a 7, sometimes 9 county Bay Area group of counties adjacent to our hall. And one of the really wonderful, very grounding things about working in our industry is we're about connecting people at live events to great musical experiences. And so with all the issues around media and how to attract audiences, if you really take the time to study the data that is available for free on the internet about who lives in your community, I think you'll begin to create a solid foundation, a real grounding in the audiences you serve and the mission of your organization and how it meets the needs of your community and how that community is changing. So we'll take a look at the Bay Area, but you certainly, everybody in this room can do this for their own community.
Great. Thanks, Nan. I'll just say your research budget wasn't that big.
It's huge.
Don't want people to get the wrong idea here. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Nan. And good afternoon. I can't sit still when I present, so I'm going to stand up. But this was a transformative study for me as a researcher working with Nan, because Nan is so brilliant and so prescient and so savvy about research that I really felt we had an amazing thought partner throughout. And just to give you a sense of what this entailed, we really designed a whole study around the research questions of the symphony about what does the audience experience 30 years, 40 years from now, what is it going to be like? It's an extraordinarily difficult research question. But in addition to the demographic analysis, which you're about to see, we did a lot of qualitative work. We did focus groups with young 20-something music lovers, including an experiential tour methodology where we took people who had never been to Davies Symphony Hall and we convened them off-site, and then we walked them over to Davies Symphony Hall and asked them what they were feeling, what they were seeing. Then we took them in. We gathered their impressions about the ticket lobby, the main lobby, and into the hall. We also did another methodology, which is called an imaginary tour, where we sat down a group of similarly aged young people and we said, imagine the new facility. Give me a tour of it. It usually takes a glass of wine or two to get that imagination going. And the young people gave us a tour of the next generation arts facility. Not rocket science, and the shocking truth is that you all can do that with a little bit of guidance. But that just gives you a flavor, in addition to community panels and consulting with stakeholders, of the kind of research that we did. So the overall goal here of this session today is to provoke you to thinking about what you can do to respond to changing conditions. It is perhaps the most difficult thing that arts managers and artists have to do. is to grasp what is changing in the macro environment in which you operate, work to understand that, and then think about what that means to your organization, your mission, your programs, your artistic vision, everything. Because there's one thing is for certain, is that the world is changing. We all know it. We see it every day. Those of you with teenage children are acutely aware of what's changing in the world. Yet we have a difficult time absorbing that. So initially, a quick run through some demographics. I don't want to overwhelm you with data, but only to encourage you to reach out and gather information about your own community, your own marketplace, because it is available to you for nothing. And then we're going to get a little more substantive discussion about trends, and Nan and I are going to alternate speaking about trends. And after that, we'll have plenty of time, I'm sure, for some Q&A, which Gail will moderate. All right, buckle up. Here we go. Bay Area population growth. This is each bar represents a decade from 2000 all the way over to 2050, and you see an upward trend from 6.2 million population to 9.2 million estimates. These are figures from the California Department of Finance. They're a few years old, but you get the picture. The colors in the bars here correspond to the counties in the Bay Area. All right, so this big sort of reddish, pinkish bar is Santa Clara County, which includes San Jose. The blue bar here is Contra Costa, Alameda. This is East Bay. And you get a sense that San Francisco County is this lighter orange bar. And what do you notice about it? Yeah. San Francisco ain't growing much. Its housing stock is relatively fixed. Its affluence causes more single-family households than would normally be in a community. So San Francisco is not growing that much. Ethnic distribution, same time periods. You're looking at white is the purple Latino, the blue, green is the Asian Pacific Islander, and then those two orange bars are African American and multiracial. This is, again, based on census data estimates. So the overall proportion of whites in the market is decreasing dramatically. It will go from 49% to 24%. It will be half what it was. The percentage of Latinos is growing significantly. Asian population is growing, not dramatically, but reliably over the years. And African American population, multiracial, is staying pretty much the same. All right, so we're seeing this is a sea change in the racial ethnic composition of the Bay Area. So you can drill down and look at counties. So this is San Francisco County, which is city, county, same thing. And this is the ethnic distribution. And you actually see the white population is growing a bit in San Francisco proper, is projected to grow by 2050. Latino population is declining a bit. Asian population is holding steady. So if you just look at San Francisco, that's this is one picture. But look at San Mateo County, south of San Francisco. What is happening there is a very different picture. All right, so who can tell me what are some of the communities in San Mateo County?
Belmont. Burlingame.
Burlingame.
City.
It's the airport and below, right? Sorry, that's where my knowledge of geography ends. But this would include like Palo Alto, right?
No, that's in Santa Clara.
No, that's Santa
Clara.
Clara, okay. And here is Santa Clara. Not quite as pronounced, but similar patterns. So for the US, what we're looking at between 1970 and 2050 is very much a pattern of ethnic and racial diversification, white population, I mean, those of you who follow politics, this is having a major effect on all aspects of American life. And what's sort of behind this is the mixing together of cultural influences in media, in music, in theater, and on television. I mean, it's mind-boggling what's happening to cultural tastes as a result of demographic shifts, right? That's perhaps the most important point I can make for you today, is that demographic change is driving cultural tastes and is fundamentally changing the marketplace in which all of us operate in ways that we don't understand and that is not well researched. This is what's happening to classical music participation. According to the National Endowment for the Arts, they've been measuring classical music participation rates for almost 30 years, and that's not a happy picture. Those are declining rates, but what do you see? There's a fundamental difference between the rates of classical music participation for Hispanics and African Americans compared to Asians and whites, all right? This is not news. This has been out for 30 years. And I don't mean by showing you this graph to say that it is race that is driving this. There are many other factors like socioeconomic status, mobility, underlying cultural tastes that are driving this. But if you just look at this by race, you begin to see. So in the Bay Area, the growing Hispanic population is at a much lower rate of classical music participation, and the declining proportion of whites is, everything is declining, but the growth areas are not associated with classical music participation. So this is a very challenging, so age. One of my favorite graphs, thanks to my colleague Salvador Acevedo, who made these graphs. So this is 2000, so 13 years ago. This is what the age distribution of the Bay Area looked like, and what do you see here? Right, it's like a snake that swallowed a pig. These are the baby boomers, right? And this is what the age distribution will look like in 2050. 2000, 2050. And you're all worried about getting young people in the doors. The single largest age cohort in 2050 will be women over 85. So this is it's just something to contemplate. It's happening gradually. But what will your community need from its cultural institutions when the age spectrum looks like this, not that? There's going to be, a big need for keeping older adults active, especially women, because they outlive us men. All right, I'm going to skip that. Nan, would you summarize the demographic analysis?
Mm-hmm. Gradual but inevitable. We do think about that. So it's just moving in a direction, and we have time to adapt and think about it and make changes. We have these ideas here about younger audiences, but also, as you could see from that last set of slides, there's an opportunity to serve older audiences, and each community will have its own approach to that. Diverse, absolutely, that was undeniable. You saw the San Francisco county and city, that's the same geography, being the most static, right? The least changing over that period, but 2/3 of our live audience comes from outside of that county. So the San Francisco Symphony is very engaged with those other counties that we showed. As we said, we pull from a 7 and/or 9 county area. So that's key to us. Social, the role of the peers is key in deciding to participate and the mode of participation itself. We really saw social as a major driver for everyone we talked to that was 35 and under. It's also a driver for the older generation, and there could be opportunities to people live on their own later for arts organizations to become a gathering place for people who are older but live alone. And then deterministic, this is very key, and it's what makes a lot of traditional presenters kind of crazy because they like the audience's role to be to show up, to sit quietly, and to appreciate. And that's been the defined role for audience for years. That's what we've built our industry on, and there's certainly enormous value in it, but we're seeing this emerging deterministic point of view coming off the audience now. And you can see that in many ways. We sometimes call it self-curating. How many of you have people who leave after half of a concert? You know, so they're letting you know they've had enough. They're deterministic in that way. They're managing their own leisure time in a way that's very customized, and it really doesn't pay heed to what we would consider traditions and customs.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So I just want to wrap up this demographic. You can access free demographics from the state of California Department of Finance, or you can hire a summer intern and pay them some obscenely low amount of money, who can research your marketplace and just present a good demographic. You know, demographic data doesn't, you know, by and large doesn't lie. You don't have to mistrust it. It's pretty solid, including these projections. And it's a great way to start a conversation amongst your staff, with your board, and perhaps even your musicians and artistic about how is our community changing, and what does that mean for us? Does it mean we just keep doing what we've always done and dig in, or are we going to evolve with our community, or perhaps are we going to transform in some way with our community? So demographic data is a great way to start. All right, let's move on. So another area of investigation that I've been researching and speaking about for years and years, but that we really went back and tried to take a fresh look for NAN, was these sort of trends. General consumer trends affect everyone, but also particularly in regards to music, trends in music consumption and musical tastes. Trends in musical tastes. And there's honestly not a lot of scholarly research literature around that. There's some, it's almost all been overseas. But we dug it up, and so now we're going to hit you with 8 or 9 kind of key trends that we found particularly significant, and Nan and I will alternate in this. So the expanding breadth of musical taste is undoubtedly the single most important trend affecting you all. It is manifested in who shows up, their expectations, the kinds of music, their ability to select programs based on repertoire, the expansiveness of their tastes, the extent to which or how they define classical music in their heads. You know, my favorite example, this is the National Endowment for the Arts experimented about 12 years ago in their national survey. They called up people on the phone. They say, did you in the last year go to a classical music concert? And the percent of people who said yes, that's what they call the classical music participation rate, right? Well, for the first time a number of years ago, they actually asked people, what did you go see? And I got my hands on the verbatim responses. My favorite answer was Showboat with Tom Bosley. It's worse for opera. Half of the people said Phantom of the Opera. So all I seek to do by saying that is that the definition of classical music in the public consciousness is changing, has changed. I mean, the effect of the classical crossover phenomenon, you remember Charlotte Church and all of her the 3 zillion tenors, and I mean, this has fundamentally changed how the public thinks about classical music. And we are kind of constructing institutions around a particular definition that does not matter so much to a new generation. That's what's so challenging about this. In short, young people, you interview young people, your kids, your grandchildren, what kind of music do you like? What's on your iPod? That's my favorite question. I actually asked that question to Michael Tilson Thomas's partner, and he was shocked that I would ask, and he proceeded to talk to me about salsa and all sorts of world music and, you know, incredibly diverse musical tastes. Tastes are diversifying. What does that mean to your institution? We're not going to try to answer that today, but I do want to pose that question to you. Nan?
Mm-hmm. And musical identities are highly idiosyncratic and increasingly multicultural. And that's absolutely reflective in those playlists. What could be more idiosyncratic than what you personally choose and curate for yourself and your listening pleasure on your personal MP3 player? And yet that is the unique experience for everyone who is involved in digital music today. It's particularly noteworthy in the people we talk to who are under 35. As far as the multicultural issue, the San Francisco Symphony has really, I think, experimented in 2 major areas. The city of San Francisco is 1/3 Chinese American, and we have a high rate of participation of Chinese Americans in the San Francisco Symphony, the board level, on stage, in our audience. And so we have had over a decade-long commitment to celebrating Chinese New Year with the city of San Francisco. Alan talked about some projects he did like this with the Santa Rosa Symphony earlier today. And I think there's an opportunity to think about programming that connects to particular communities in that way. 5 years ago, we also launched a program around Dia de los Muertos for the same kinds of passion to connect to our community in a new way. A third very obvious connection, and we just had really a lot of fun with this last month, is your Russian community. Many communities have a very engaged Russian live music attendance, and we did some work on Stravinsky with the Rite of Spring, and we had a lot of engagement there. So this is a creative discussion really between the external affairs team, whoever that is for you, the people involved in community audience and your programming group, about what might work. And it's really not driven by a commercial agenda, but it is programming with great sensitivity to who's living in your community and who you're serving. If we were commercial presenters, we would focus group and test group the next version of Wicked, and then we just run it all over the country like crazy. We're not. We're mission-driven arts organizations with a point of view about music, but a creative discussion about who might come, who's living in the community, and what that programming DNA looks like really needs to take place, I think, to address this on an ongoing basis.
Great. Interdisciplinarity, really important notion. Think about Cirque du Soleil, right? It is the quintessential interdisciplinary artistic organization, and that, by the way, has made its founder a billionaire. Dance, circus arts, athleticism, theatricality, lighting design, music, you name it. The public has grown quite comfortable with that blend and is quite open to the cross-artistic influences. This is challenging when you define an institution around a particular discipline, music, and even within that, a particular band of music, when tastes are diffusing. So you're very naturally seeing arts groups all over the country do more interdisciplinary work. And there's language issues here. Interdisciplinary can mean, for example, musicians collaborating with dancers, or musicians collaborating with visual artists. But it also can mean musicians collaborating with scientists and scholars in other disciplines. And there's a whole movement in the presenting field right now called Creative Campus. I've had the pleasure over the years of evaluating a grant program of the Doris Duke Foundation called Creative Campus, and I've educated myself very much about. There's a paper on the Association of Arts Presenters website. Their website is APAP365, apap365.org, and if you just Google Creative Campus, you'll find it. And it's a paper about interdisciplinarity and how students learn through the arts, but across disciplines. So there's a lot going on. If you're not on a college campus, I would look at your corporate community and look for opportunities to collaborate across disciplines. But I think this is a big deal. There are plenty of examples that we could talk about of interdisciplinary work, and I'm sure many of you are doing this, collaborations with writers, with actors. We're starting to see animation, the incredible work the New World Symphony is doing around visualization of classical music. We're starting to see this. But the point here is that this is coming out of a sea change in cultural tastes, in that the consumers are more acclimated to different artistic influences. Nan.
For many, music is a multi-sensory experience. So I would just like to say, one of the things about working for an orchestra for 5 years, I think it's made me a much better listener. Why? Because the dominant aesthetic and artistic experience is through your ears. So when you look at our audiences today, it's full of people who use this organ to get an enormous amount of information and have great enduring artistic experiences. But that is not the majority of the way people absorb cultural experiences. We're kind of, as ear people, in a little bit different space. That's why radio is so important, actually, as a vehicle for communication for classical music, because this organ dominates our audience's experience in a very positive way for them. But we do need to deal with the issue of the multisensory experiences, because it's now part of the expectation set for almost any live event. Just to put the word football in there instead of music, and think about where the National Football League in America's been in the last 5 years, their live audiences are dropping. They're actually going down. Fewer and fewer people are going to football stadiums to watch football. And the NFL is actively investing in making the football experience at the stadium a more multi-sensory experience. And just this spring, the commissioner actually allowed and insisted that Wi-Fi be in all the stadiums, that replays be available on the large screens, that cameras are going to be allowed in the locker room, for goodness sake. You talk about people wanting to get into the artist's experience, right? And that will be, part of the live experience. So here you have a gigantic industry, United States football, really dealing with the issue of this multi-sensory experience as people gather for live events. And I think we as music organizations really need to think about what's appropriate for our organization, what's going to move us forward, what are the decisions we need to make around this issue.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. That was a major focus in our conversation about the audience experience, is sort of the diverging sensibilities of what is an enjoyable experience. Mm-hmm. And for many audience members, the visual experience is not important. In fact, they close their eyes to block it out so they can concentrate on the music. And for other segments of the audience, the visual experience is critical and unsatisfying. So this just, for a generation of young people who grew up on music videos, music is a visual experience. and the two can't be separated. So I honestly believe that this is the frontier for the whole orchestra field, is visualization, developing, cultivating an entire new generation of artists, of musicians and visual artists and filmmakers who collaborate in visualization, artistically beautiful, artistically excellent visualization of music, has the potential to open up classical music to another generation. All right, I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent here, taste communities, because one of the breakthroughs that we need as a field is a better conceptualization of our audience. We have been thinking about the audience according to what package they buy for decades. And it's deeply ingrained, and I'm not going to go off on subscription. That's another session. You've got that tomorrow. But I do think we need a better way of talking about audiences in more dimension. If, in fact, our communities are diversifying and our audiences are diversifying, we need a better way of talking about audiences. And during the study with Nan, I came across this term, taste community. Have you heard of this? Do you know where it comes from? It actually comes from social media. And it refers to the zillions of people who like Lady Gaga, and form a taste community. Well, that's debatable. Just kidding. Lovely. But it's a phenomenon, and if you look it up in Wikipedia, it's a taste community is any group of people that you share the same passion for something. Whether it be sailing or painting or a popular music artist. But it struck me as a really useful idea in thinking about our audience as a collection of taste communities that's constantly changing. And we thought about it a little more. Taste communities is not about demographics. It's about what you love, what you like to do, what you're into. In opera, there's a taste community around Wagner, right? There are people who define themselves because they love Wagner. And in classical music, there are all sorts of taste communities. And as Nan so provoked me in saying, there's actually a taste community around people who want their concerts conventionally presented with no talking, and that's actually a taste community, which is really a helpful way of thinking about that. And there are also taste communities around people who want enhanced visuals, or people who prefer 12-tone music, or people who follow a specific composer, or a specific period of music, or music from a specific area of the world. I mean, the beauty of taste communities is that it's so multidimensional and overlapping. And I believe you can curate them. You can create a taste community in your community. So they're malleable, and people, we know so little about how people's tastes change over their lifetimes. But they do. I love asking people, think about your own music and what you're listening to, and how have your musical tastes changed over the last 5 years? They have. Our aesthetics invariably evolve over our lifetimes. And we know almost nothing about this because no one's ever done the long study, But people move in and out of art forms. People like dance aficionados, they sometimes they kind of shift over to theater, and sometimes vice versa. And we just know so little about that. But I would ask you to think about your audience and what taste communities actually, through your own programming, have you already created? And how can you continue to cultivate those, or what new taste communities might you create with your programming? So I just wanted to throw that out there. We've done a lot of segmentation work, and the Pacific Symphony commissioned a study a couple years ago, an audience segmentation study. We know there's diversity in the audience. There's diversity in knowledge level, there's diversity in preferences for different kinds of music, there's diversity in appetite for educational engagement. I mean, there's all this diversity. And we really have to make sense of that. This is getting harder and harder to serve everyone with one program. All right, Nan.
Audiences will demand more opportunities to personalize their concert experiences. And I think any of you who have ever presented music or any art form outdoors, you can just see this instantly. So we think about 3 rings of participation, what I call a full attention ring, a partial attention ring, and a very socialized ring of participation. Now when you come into a concert hall, our expectation is that everyone in the audience is in full attention. The chairs are all oriented toward the stage. There's a set of behaviors and protocol that everyone follows, like a concert protocol. That's a full attention protocol, and that's how most of our facilities are designed. But if you go out and you present in a park or you do something in a non-traditional space, you'll see people organize in this way, where you have the full attention people very close, people who are enjoying it, but in a partial attention with a picnic or they're talking, and then a very socialized participation. They're enjoying playing Frisbee, but they're 100 feet from the stage, but they're also in some way connected to what's happening on the stage with the orchestra as well. And I think you have to recognize and understand that people, especially, we saw this very strongly with our 35 and unders, are demanding that they design their type of participation. So when they walk into a purpose-designed venue like a concert hall, they are not necessarily seeing how they fit in there, because their entire leisure portfolio is designed around their ability to customize their experiences. And so it's something to think about as this emerging trend.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So Pandora has a classical. What is it? What is it? Explain that now. Yet another.
It's a nightmare. Just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah, I haven't really had time to look into it myself, but I think they see an opportunity to broaden their audience, and it's an opportunity to create your own tailored, classical, curated experience,
Right.
based on the tastes of choosing a couple of pieces, and
Right.
yeah.
So this brings up the topic of preference discovery, which is another term I would like you to think about and learn about. Preference discovery. Preference discovery is a business practice typically associated with online retailing, where items are suggested to you based on your past purchase behavior. You're all quite familiar with Amazon, Netflix. It's all over. Very sophisticated algorithms. And we are so susceptible to suggestion from a computer. Because our frail brains are vulnerable to suggestion, because it's a filter. They're getting us to focus on something. We have a million choices, but when one of them is put in front of us, a lot of us grab it. And it's one of the ways that our brains handle too much information. We reduce complexity instinctively. So in the area of classical music, on iTunes Radio, if you click on classical, there's about 200 channels, roughly. Oh, my favorite is Radio Bartok from Hungary, because they play great music and then the announcements are in Hungarian. Oh my God. And you don't have to try to listen. That's what you don't have to try to understand them. So I have this conversation with artistic directors of theaters all the time. It's like, why wouldn't you recommend to your subscribers what is the best drama on television? Oh, we could never do that. It's not theater. But it's how most Americans experience drama. And there's a glut of content, and people need help making selections. Or they make poor selections and regret it. There's a wonderful book from about 8 years ago called The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz, a professor at Swarthmore. And he basically says, when people are presented with too many choices, they shut down, they make a quick decision, which they regret, and they have a bad experience with the product, and you lose them. You know, so my favorite pet peeve is getting arts brochures in the mail that are, you know, pages and pages of chronologically organized information, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't have time to look through all of this. It's just sort of, we need to help people make decisions. We need to provide them with filters. So why wouldn't you suggest to your ticket buyers where to find great classical music on the web? Or if you're going to listen to streaming audio at home, we recommend. This month we recommend Radio Bartok, or, you know. Because the more people listen to music, the more they learn to love it, the more their aesthetic develops, and the better patrons they become. I remember years ago suggesting the St. Louis Symphony that they do a CD swap. They're subscribing. You bring in 3 CDs to a concert, and you take home 3, you know, and you just, you know, but they're like, oh, we could never. Anyway, now CDs are, you know. But how many people, I mean, have hundreds and hundreds of CDs that are never listened to? And it's an underperforming asset, if you think of it, if you're an orchestra. Think of it. All the music in people's homes is an underperforming asset for you. So anyway, think about filtering, helping people quickly find the experiences they will find most rewarding, and you'll do them a great service and I think attract more. All right, Nan, you're batting cleanup here.
Yeah, this is our last trend we'd like to talk about. The need for human-to-human social contact grows as a result of all the time spent in virtual space. We mentioned yoga and attention earlier. Why is yoga so hot? You know, it's a 3,000-year-old art form, and what can classical music learn from yoga? You know, when I was growing up, I'm 51, my mom took yoga, and she was the only one I knew involved in yoga. And we were very involved in, you know, sports equipment and aerobics, and Jane Fonda was really big in the 80s. Yoga is so hot because it's highly local, it's deeply personal, and you make an individual journey as you make a commitment to those classes or sessions week after week after week, that you can feel that growth. And I really believe participation in classical music can deliver those same kind of benefits. So if you think about the way people come together socially and the nature of live performance and the communication between the artist and the listener, there's so much we can learn in that space. There's so much we can showcase if that's a great space of growth for our community. And so I think this is really one of our biggest opportunities to create what we would call and discuss as a cosmopolitan canopy, so that your venue is a social gathering space. Definitely already happens at the highest level for board members and informed, you know, subscribers and your regulars. They see your destination as providing that already. That's why they're coming 6, 7, 8 times a year if they're subscribers. How do you translate those social benefits to newcomers? And I really think that sense of welcome has to be both on and off the stage, because it's kind of about making new friends and bringing them into this human-to-human experience.